In the 90s, it was clear to me that a guru was required for guidance. A serious doubt arose, however, as to whether this guru should be a living one or any departed greats like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa also could be taken. At about the same time, I attended a spiritual retreat organized by Sri Ramakrishna Mutt, Hyderabad, India, under the guidance of a senior monk of Ramakrishna order, Swami Ranganathananda. Towards the end of the session, they suggested that if anybody had any questions, they could drop a slip in a designated box. I wrote a slip asking about my doubt on the Guru. For want of time, they picked up only 6 slips out of more than 200. Luckily, mine was picked. The answer of Swami was that one could start with a divine incarnation or a chosen God as a Guru, but at the right time, a Guru would come in a human form to help. In the same year, on my way home from office, I gave a lift to an elderly gentleman. To a casual inquiry as to where he was going, he said that he was paying a visit to his Guru. As I was curious to meet such Gurus, with his permission, I accompanied him to his Guru. This Guru is a very pious man who has been guiding many Shirdi Sai devotees. I had a discussion with him and mentioned my desire for the Guru. He suggested that I should read Guru Charitra and visit Shirdi. Guru Charitra contains details of incarnations of Lord Dattatreya prior to the Shirdi Sai. I read the book and paid a visit to Shirdi. Whether it is prior to the visit or after the visit, I do not remember. I had a vivid dream in which Shirdi Sai appeared as a young man. The moment he appeared, I just folded my hands and pleaded, Jnanam, Jnanam. And I woke up suddenly. It was so thrilling that I went and sat in the puja room, though it was 3 a.m. After that, an intense desire for a guru landed me in Tiruvannamalai at the feet of Sri Ramana Maharshi in early 1991. Until this period, I had been worshipping divine personalities like Lord Shiva, Ganapati, Mother Parvati, Lord Muruga. The worship had been going on in the form of mental worship that involved doing the entire process of worship not physically but only mentally, like inviting the deity, offering a seat, water, bathing, decoration, offering flowers, and a variety of meals, etc., as is done in Hindu temples. At this stage, I happened to visit Sri Ramanashramam. The first lessons of Advaita I got were from a small book, Who Am I, by Sri Ramana Maharshi. Though I followed self-inquiry as suggested by Ramana Maharshi for some years, the full significance of the teaching did not dawn until much later. The following is how I understood the Who Am I inquiry process. Mr. X is there with an object in front of him, of which he asks himself the question, Am I the object? The answer is obviously no, as it is separate from the subject, Mr. X. Then the next question is, Am I the body? Here also the answer is no, as the subject, Mr. X, clearly identifies his body as an object. Extending this questioning, Mr. X finds that he himself is the subject to the objects like his thoughts, his feelings, etc., and reaches a point where his I only remains as just subject. It is pure awareness before any thoughts emerge. The practice of holding to this awareness to the exclusion of all thoughts would lead one to the dropping of false I, revealing the real self. What I understood was that the false I is the individual self, habitually considered as limited to the body only, while self is that infinite awareness. Dropping the false I implies that the individual self recognizes that the pure awareness one reaches in the enquiry has no form and therefore not limited to the body. A real shift occurs when one has direct experience of this instead of a mere intellectual understanding. At this stage, I could understand intellectually that realization does not involve any becoming and it is not objective but only subjective understanding. But I was stuck at this intellectual understanding and was struggling for a way out. In fact, Sri Ramana said that all one could do was to go up to this subjective silence where the mind stops working and find that there was nothing one could do except holding to that I. Over the course of time, by operation of grace, self reveals. Though not producing any big shift, the practice of self enquiry over several years brought significant positive improvements in my material as well as spiritual life. After retirement and family responsibilities, I moved to Tiruvannamalai for my retired life in 2009. Moving to Tiruvannamalai and constructing a house there was also not at my instance, as could be seen from the following narration. My brother's son Chakravarti was with me in Hyderabad for studies since his childhood. After my son left for the US in 94, this boy used to help me in my affairs. Around 1996, one day I casually mentioned that it would not be wise to live in Hyderabad after retirement, considering heavy pollution there. We both forgot this. In 1998, I went to Botswana on an employment contract with government of Botswana, leaving the management of domestic affairs to him. As international calls were very costly then, I used to call from Botswana to India once a week only. In the year 2000, one day in the morning around 5, I was doing walking in the long corridor of my quarters as part of my daily exercise. My mind went to Tiruvannamalai and Ramanashramam. Normally, whenever I visualize those places, I feel very happy. But this time a wave of ecstasy surged and a flash came in the mind. Why not plan for a permanent stay there? Immediately I thought that the best way could be by buying some plot and plan retirement life there. It came to my mind that my company in India had a branch in Chittor and whether I should request the in charge there to go to Arunachalam and search for a plot. While I was thinking thus, the phone rang. I wondered as to who could it be at that time. It was a call from my nephew. As I already mentioned, we only used to call India from Botswana and not vice versa. On the phone, he recalled our discussion a few years back about staying outside Hyderabad after retirement and asked me whether he should go to Tiruvannamalai, that is Arunachalam, and buy a plot there. He knew I liked the place most. I was thrilled at the coincidence and immediately told him to go ahead. He came to Tiruvannamalai the very next day and with the help of Sri Mani and others in the ashram purchased a plot besides Nanagaru ashram and registered it immediately. No doubt, a higher power at work. Life was going on with the same level of understanding till 2012, except two important dreams that happened in 1999 and 2000. The first one was Ramana Maharshi's appearance in a vivid dream. I was with 4 or 5 people in this dream. Somebody mentioned that there was Maharshi nearby. I said, let us go and see him. When I approached him, he looked into my eyes and with a smile indicated my attention to his feet and then uttered, It is something like, come on, in vernacular. I prostrated immediately and took his feet into my hands with an inexplicable ecstasy. Sri Jinnur Nannagaru, who had been giving thousands of lectures on Ramana, told me that the implication of the dream was that Ramana was suggesting to me to surrender, which perfectly tallied with an earlier message I received indirectly. Let me narrate that. Sometime in 1991, I went to Sri Ramana Kendra in Hyderabad for the first time. I was introduced to one Dr. K. Subramanian, who is popularly known as Dr. K.S., who established the Hyderabad Kendra. I noticed that all the members of the Kendra had a very high respect for Dr. K.S. They used to meet every Sunday for satsang and I started attending every Sunday. After listening to Dr. K.S. for some time, I was convinced that he mainly believed in what Ramana Maharshi used to say, that everything happens according to the will of a higher power. Except for recording my address, I gave no details of my activities to the Kendra, nor did I discuss any personal affairs with anybody. At about the same time, I ventured into a small partnership to establish an educational institution. My partner was an adventurous type. He admitted some 30 students to a computer course without waiting for final clearance from Usmania University, and he was confident that he would get it. But when I visited the university along with him, the concerned committee head was adamant and refused to recommend the approval as the facilities provided to students were not adequate. At that time, there were neither financial resources nor time to comply with all their conditions. Some other institutes got approval with similar status, but unfortunately, the person heading our committee was strict and adamant. I was really scared as we already admitted students and it involved the careers of some 30 students. At that time, I was tempted to pray God to bring some change of mind in that committee head, but I had no habit of praying to God for personal favors. At this time also, I was in two minds as to whether I should pray to God for help. While still in that crisis, I received a postcard one day to my address that simply contained one sentence: Surrender is the highest prayer. It was signed by Dr. Case, and as already mentioned, nobody in the Kendra knew my problems, let alone Dr. Case. I was told that Dr. Case impulsively wrote these postcards and would send them to the address of the devotees whose name comes to his mind early in the morning. What he wrote in every card was not uniform. He used to write to each member in a different way. I was astonished to find that the card contained a message confirming to my belief that everything happens according to the will of God and the best thing is to accept His will. My belief was put to test through this crisis. Years later, when I was given the significance of my dream that Sri Ramana was asking me to surrender, I was astonished at the continuity of guidance, though this time it was more direct than earlier. This dream appearance of Sri Ramana helped me substantially to accept ups and downs in material life with more equanimity. Not that there were no disappointments or adversities, but the time within which I recovered from them came down substantially. The second dream occurred in 2000. At about this time, for no specific reason, I was contemplating a lot on Mother Apita Kuchamba, the concerts of Lord Arunachaleswara in Tiruvannamalai. The word mother was ringing in me silently, very frequently, and one night I had a very vivid dream where three very big photos like frames appeared in front of me, but these frames did not contain anything. Suddenly, in the center frame platform, from the left-hand corner, a girl of 14 years in silk robes, smiling and looking at me, walked in. The moment I saw her, I could recognize that she was the mother in human form, and I shouted, "Mother, Mother." As my shouts were loud, my wife woke up and shook me, thinking that I was having a bad dream. That face of the mother was so clear, and it was in my mind ever since. Though many times I wished before sleeping for her appearance, it never happened, but the face never left my memory. As I already mentioned, I had been waiting for grace to turn my intellectual understanding into real knowledge. Sometime in 2012, I viewed an interview on YouTube. In this interview, one Mr. Rick Archer interviewed Mrs. Eli Roosdar as part of series of interviews under the title Buddha at the Gas Pump. Though she was from Iran, settled in America, she quoted much from Sufi saints, and the most surprising thing was that she realized self following Who Am I enquiry only. A scholar who mastered Hindu scriptures was living with me in Tiruvannamalai at that time. I viewed the interview with him again, and he confirmed that she was indeed a jnani. In the interview, She described three categories of seekers, grouping them based on the status of their progress. The third group is supposed to be in the last stage and waiting for a final push to plunge into infinite awareness. She said that she was prepared to help such people. In March 2013, I visited my son who had been working in California. There, I happened to view another interview of Mrs. Roosdar by Rick Archer. This interview contained several answers given by Mrs. Roosdar to the questions of some seekers. I was so impressed that I watched it again along with my son. Towards the end of the interview, she mentioned that those seekers who fulfilled certain conditions she listed could contact her, and if she considered that they were ready for a final push, she would invite them for a personal interview and help. My son suggested that I should write to her immediately and told me that he would take her to Long Island, New York, where she is staying, in case she granted me an audience. When I went to her website in order to find the details of mail, etc., her photograph on the home page made me wonderstruck. In this photograph, she looked much younger to what she appeared in the interview. Immediately, the form of goddess that appeared in my dream in the year 2000, described previously, came to my mind, and I had no doubt she was the same person, as it was still fresh in my memory even after a lapse of more than 10 years. The only difference was age. Immediately I wrote to her, but somehow did not mention about the dream. In my mail, I described in detail about my exposure to spiritual matters, Sri Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, Who Am I Enquiry, etc. After receiving the letter, she replied that I wrote a lot and she felt that I was not yet ready. However, she gave me a Skype interview. In the Skype, she asked me whether I was still active in the world, striving for name and fame or earning money, etc. She also asked me as to what I meant by realization and what was my expectation, etc. After listening to me, she reiterated that I was still not ready. She suggested that I should drop all concepts and all attachments, including Ramana, etc. She suggested that I should continue Who Am I Enquiry and asked me to follow the tips given by her on Who Am I Enquiry in a German TV interview. She advised me to contact her after a couple of months. I viewed that interview as well and could follow her suggestions easily and was spending more than 4 hours in meditation daily, stopping all other distractions. Even while walking, I could do the enquiry. There was a significant improvement, though I could not specify what it was. Mentioning this, I sent a mail to her, thanking her for the tips and informed her that I could plunge into inquiry for hours following them. Immediately she replied that I was ready and could come to her for a personal audience. I finally met her on June 13th. After the initial introduction to the subject and after making me comfortable, she had me enter meditation with closed eyes. After a few minutes, she started asking questions. She asked whether I was feeling a deep silence immediately behind the normal awareness that I was experiencing. Replies to these questions came from me without any thinking process in operation. I replied to the question. I mentioned that I could intuitively feel the deep silence behind my awareness all the time. In reply to her further queries, I told her that what I noticed was not confined to my body and had no limitation like space. To her question on that awareness, I replied that the awareness was nothing but other than me. At that moment, she made me declare, I am that, in a louder tone, indicating my identity with the deep silence. I mentioned that it was so clear that the silence behind my awareness was eternal and everything, including my body, was within me, as I did not feel any difference between my awareness and that deep silence. It was also clear that I could neither die nor take birth, as the I here was definitely not the individual self, hitherto felt to be inside only and limited to the body. I must admit that recognition of this awareness did not happen just then only. It happened to me sometime during the period of intense inquiry I was practicing before meeting her. At what exact moment I cannot say. During the same period, it suddenly flashed why I was doing this as an individual self. At that moment, something happened. My whole personality, body, and all its history rolled into one like a ball and dropped. Afterwards, I could feel some difference. The awareness was not just limited to the body, it is beyond the body as a light from the bulb goes beyond the bulb without breaking the bulb. The real significance of this dropping of limitation to the body I could understand only when Mother made me declare, I am that, with a confident note. It was a recognition of truth already existing. But for her involvement, I could have been continuing without knowing the significance of what exactly happened. She is the Guru to whom destiny took me. She mentioned that there was no need for any further effort and there would be further unfolding on its own, and it happened exactly as she mentioned. That is the greatness of realized greats. Just like a small quantity of detergent clear a lot of dirt, her declaration about my understanding worked wonders and many mysteries unfolded on their own. I realized later that it was impossible to gain this confidence by just reading books or listening to lectures on Upanishads without the confirmation from a realized Guru. I continued to remain in the awareness which was no longer limited to the body. In a way, it could be explained as a feeling that all the objective world, including my body, is within me, where me is no longer limited to the body. On the day when I came out of her house, it was raining. Immediately it flashed that rain was happening in me and it could not wet me, but it could wet my body only. Subsequently, I experienced a remarkable change in life. Things which were considered so very important no longer remained important, and real freedom from many chains was noticed. Afterwards, there was an important development as part of the unfolding she mentioned. In the interview with the Rick, showing a cup in her hand, she mentioned that even the cup was nothing but consciousness. Even after the shift in awareness, this point remained vague to me. Though all objects are within me and I am no longer the body but only limitless awareness, it was still not clear then as to how the objects also could be me. In Tiruvannamalai, one thing I most enjoyed was my daily evening walk in the picturesque road around Arunachala Hill. During one of these walks, I was contemplating on the reality of the objective world. To recognize objects also as awareness, I thought that I should start with the closest object to me. It became clear to me that all of my feelings like pleasure and pain, thoughts in the mind, my physical body, and the whole outside world were objects in that order to my pure awareness. Thus, all objects could be summarized as BMI, body, mind, intellect, plus the world. I am aware of the world through thought. What is a thought? What are its contents?